NZX offers a function in its futures markets which allows for the exchange of a futures position for a physical or swap position at a price privately negotiated between two counterparties. For a trader, exchange for physical and exchange for swap facilities can be used to open a futures position, close a futures position, or switch a futures position for the underlying asset. There are two functions within the NZX futures markets which allow for this. An EFP involves the exchange of a physical position for a futures position. An EFS involves the exchange of a swap position for a futures position. There are multiple scenarios where NZX EFP and EFS facilities can be used. Following are two examples of EFP transactions. Substituting swaps for physical contracts in the following examples will give an overview of EFS transactions. There are two parties in this example. Both parties have open futures positions. One has sold or is short futures, and one has bought or is long. Kate, a dairy processor, and Steve, a manufacturer who buys dairy ingredients. Both Kate and Steve have a futures hedge in place relative to their price exposure and want to convert their futures positions into a physical contract. It is June, and Kate knows that she will have ingredients to sell in October, which is peak milk production season in New Zealand. Kate sells 1,000 metric tonnes of NZX whole milk powder futures for October settlement at $3,200 to remove her price risk on this amount of their future ingredients inventory. It is now July, and Steve has decided that he needs to protect the risk of price moving higher in October against his procurement budget for whole milk powder, so he buys 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder futures at $3,000 on NZX. Fast forward to September, and Kate wants to find a physical buyer for her 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder, and Steve would also like to find a physical seller. Steve's manufacturing firm is a customer of the processor, and they reach out to talk to them about buying 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder for shipment in October. Kate and Steve realise that they also have offsetting futures contracts at different prices. Kate and Steve agree to exchange their futures positions by entering an EFP trade at the current NZX whole milk powder October futures market price. The current market price is $3,500. Kate is short futures at $3,200 and Steve is long futures at $3,000. To execute the EFP, Kate will close out their futures position by going long a futures contract at the current NZX market price of $3,500, and Steve will take the other side and close out by going short a futures contract at $3,500. To execute the transfer of their closed-out futures position into a physical contract, Steve agrees to buy 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder at $3,500. They inform their respective brokers who execute the EFP via the exchange. So for Kate, she now has a physical contract to sell to their manufacturer customer, Steve, at $3,500 plus a negative mark to market for the closing out of her futures positions, equivalent to $300, giving her a net fixed selling price of $3,200, which was her original futures contract rate. For Steve, the manufacturer, he now has a physical contract to buy from the processor at $3,500 and a positive mark to market for the closing out of his futures positions, equivalent to $500, giving him a net fixed buying price of $3,000, which was his original futures contract rate. So in this example, both counterparties have exchanged their futures positions for a physical contract with each other. In this next example, only one side of the transaction has an open futures position. There are two parties to the transaction: John, who buys and sells dairy ingredients for a dairy trading company, and Steve, who is a procurement manager for a drinks manufacturing company which uses dairy ingredients in its finished product. It is June, and Steve needs to acquire 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder to be shipped by October. He hedges his price risk by buying 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder NZX futures for October settlement at $3,000. Fast forward to July, and the NZX October whole milk powder futures price is now $3,200. Steve tells John that he would like to secure his supply of 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder for October shipment, but John believes that there is a high chance that the price might continue to rise. To enable John to maintain his exposure to a higher price and for Steve to secure his supply arrangements, John and Steve negotiate an EFP, which provides Steve with a fixed price physical contract to buy in exchange for his short futures position, which John will acquire to maintain price exposure to further market price moves. John agrees to supply Steve with a physical contract for 1,000 metric tonnes of whole milk powder for October shipment at the current futures price of $3,200. John also agrees to buy 1,000 metric tonnes of NZX October whole milk powder futures at $3,200 from Steve, which creates a long futures position for John, and at the same time closes out Steve's short futures position. They inform their respective brokers who execute the EFP via the exchange. So Steve ends up with his futures position closed out for a $200 per metric tonne financial gain and a physical contract to buy whole milk powder in October at $3,200, giving him a $3,000 per metric tonne purchase price, being the same price as his initial futures position. John now holds a physical contract to sell whole milk powder shipping in October at $3,200 and a long futures position at $3,200. The EFP has enabled Steve to secure his supply and close out his futures position, freeing up his futures margin, although he has acquired counterparty settlement risk by contracting directly with John. John has secured his physical sale and maintains price exposure to a further move higher in prices, allowing both parties to achieve their pricing and physical supply requirements. John can fix the price of a physical product at any time by selling back the 1,000 October whole milk powder futures contracts on the exchange. In summary, EFP and EFS transactions serve a variety of purposes and are useful tools to exchange in and out of futures and physical or OTC contracts. For more detailed information on the rules and method to execute an EFP or EFS transaction, please visit the link on screen or talk to your broker.